Hello, UW Communication. We are here with alumna Rachel Lynn Solomon. Rachel lives in Seattle and loves tap dancing, red lipstick, and new wave music. Most importantly, however, as I mentioned, she is an alumna of our department. She graduated in 2011. She's a former journalist who has worked for NPR and produced radio shows for Cairo and KUOW. And once she helped set a Guinness World Record for the most natural redheads in one place. However, today we're going to be talking with her about her debut novel, You'll Miss Me When I'm Gone. So Rachel, welcome back to the department.
Thank you so much.
So let's just dive right in. You were trained as a journalist, but as a novelist, what would you say is the biggest difference about how you go about writing?
Yeah, well, probably the biggest and most obvious difference is that this is a little bit longer than an article.
Usually.
But at the same time, it's a lot easier to gain an audience for something that's only 700 words long as opposed to 70,000 words. So I think being able to engage someone through the length of a book is definitely a challenge. But I found when I was writing articles and working for the Daily, and I freelanced for a few newspapers, I would always focus on a person, as whether I was writing a breaking news piece or a feature story, really focus on that one person's story, and I guess their arc even throughout the article. And in that sense, there are a lot of similarities, since I tend to focus on books that are more character-driven as opposed to plot-driven. Because I think characters are what really make us care about whether it's a book or an article. Like, we're always looking for that human connection.
How do you go about writing for multiple characters? Because I know that this book has two main protagonists in the form of the sisters, but there's also people that inhabit and share their world with them. So how do you build those different characters?
Yeah, well, so this one in particular, the idea came to me as two protagonists. So just to give a little elevator pitch of the book, it's about twin sisters whose mom has Huntington's disease. And at the beginning of the book, they take a genetic test to see if they've inherited it. And one tests positive and one tests negative. And it follows them throughout senior year. It's both perspectives as they're dealing with the aftermath of that and their tense relationship, also as their mom is getting worse. And also from the beginning, I wanted to write twins who were both ambitious characters, because I think a lot of times the narrative that we get is like, there's the slacker twin and the overachiever, like the one that's going to jail and the one that's going to Harvard. And yeah, I wanted to write two twins that were ambitious. So in this case, one is a music prodigy and one wants to become a surgeon. But they are very different just in their approaches to life and also in their communication styles. Wasn't just trying to fill the word communication in there, but I guess it works in that context.
Well done.
Yeah. So, the musician character, a lot of her language is more rhythmic and lyrical, whereas the scientist character, her sentences are choppier, she's more logical. The musician character is just a little more emotional. I made a list of musical language and scientific language so that I could just kind of throw in there every so often as a subtle reminder to readers that this is whose head you're in. So for the musician character, she's talking about time passing, and she says a movement passes before this happens, as opposed to a minute or a moment. So things like that helped me to develop them as separate people.
Awesome. So of the two female protagonists, of the two sisters, one is a little bit more sexually adventurous, while the other is more reserved. Why do you feel it's important for readers to see and be exposed to characters who are that way, especially in this day and age when there are so many controversial messages going around about how women should be with their own bodies and with each other?
Yeah, so part of my rationale in writing those two characters was to show that there is no one way that women should act or dress or feel about their bodies or the relationships with other people. I wanted to center a story of these two women and their relationship with each other, and just their different relationships with their bodies and the people around them.
So why choose sisters as your main protagonist? You said you wanted to tell a story from two different perspectives, but why sisters instead of best friends or cousins or something like that?
I picked sisters because I think there's just a great deal of love there, but also a lot of competition and jealousy, even if you're not necessarily striving toward the same things. And it's really hard not to compare yourself to the other person. And, I'm sure that exists among other siblings, brothers, best friends. But I think nothing is quite like that relationship of sisters. And again, I think we just don't center women's stories, especially women's stories about their relationships with other women, whatever the nature of those relationships happen to be. I don't think we center those stories enough.
And with twins, why have twin sisters?
That sort of goes back to the concept. So when I was researching the book, one of my first little nuggets of an idea was I was just randomly researching on Wikipedia, as you do all of your in-depth research. I don't even know how I landed on the page, but I was in like a Wikipedia black hole, and I was on a page about Huntington's disease, which I'd always known a little bit about, and I had found just really devastating because you can take a genetic test and see if you will inherit it. And I saw the statistic that 50% of children who have a parent with Huntington's will develop the disease. And so that immediately sparked the idea, what if there were sisters, and then what if they were twins and they had just these diverging paths? And then on top of that, is the twin who tested positive, or is the twin who tested negative, does she really get off easier? Because there's still so much guilt and so much, you almost have to take on that you're going to have to take on a caretaker role, not just for your parent, but for your sibling. So just a lot of emotion there. Yeah.
You mentioned your own relationship with your sister. What other parts of you did you put into this novel?
Yeah, so I think these characters they each have a little bit in common with me, but it's more like adjacent qualities as opposed to, things I actually stole from my personality. But I'm a musician to some degree. I played piano growing up. I played in a band in high school. I play piano a little bit these days. My main character plays the viola, which I do not play, but I've always thought was really beautiful, and I just liked the idea of writing a classical musician. The scientific character, she is much more reserved. I think she's just very similar to how I was in high school, so very high achieving and single-minded, I need to go to this school and get this degree so I can have this job. So yeah, they're little pieces, but it's not autobiographical.
Gotcha. So what really surprised you during the process of getting published? Because we hear all sorts of triumph stories and stories of horror and sleepless nights. What was the process like for you?
Yeah, so in addition to all of that, so this is actually, they call it the debut, and it is my first published book, but it's my 5th completed manuscript since I started getting serious about writing. And I got serious about writing actually in 2011, which was when I graduated. Yeah, so I wrote several books that did not really go anywhere. I had a literary agent prior to my current one, and we tried selling some books that did not sell. And then I found a new agent, and we submitted this book. And it sold after getting 2 offers in 6 weeks, which was really exciting.
Congratulations.
Thank you. And we sold another book with it that's going to come out in 2019, which used to sound like it was really far away, but in just a little bit we'll be able to say that's next year. So what I've learned is there are no 2 similar paths, and that no path is really a straight line. I have multiple friends who were on, 3rd, 4th agents. And a literary agent is someone who pitches your book to publishers. They don't make money until they sell your book, so they're only going to take on books that they really believe in. So yeah, it's just, there's no straight line, and stubbornness pays off. Stubbornness, luck, maybe a little bit of talent, but honestly, I think most of it is those first 2.
Did you publish any of this prior to sending it to your agent? Did you push any of it out online, get some feedback from the community?
Yeah, I have a pretty robust community of writer friends online and just around Seattle. that I received feedback from. So yeah, there's definitely like a critique process that it went through.
So going back, because you are an alumna of this program, our students want to hear about your experiences during your educational career. Is there any particular experience that you can recall from your time at the University of Washington that really shaped who you are now, impacted your career, like a particular project or interaction you had with one of our professors?
Yeah, so a couple things come to mind. I was working pretty closely with Joanne Silberner, who was an artist in residence at the time, and she was an NPR reporter, and we worked really closely on a podcast project that I was working on, and she was just extremely supportive and just a really savvy person when it comes to the industry. And then I also, one experience that really comes to mind is I remember being in the newsroom at the Daily when the Amanda Knox verdict came down. I believe it was her appeal, and it was like maybe 10 or 11 at night, and there were only a few of us there, and we were like getting a call from, I think, like a British reporter or something, and even though my path is diverged from that a little bit, I still really love, like, you know, telling stories and being in something, I guess, whether it's, you know, a busy newsroom or you know, being immersed in a project.
What is something you think students should know about the big bad world before they graduate?
Yeah, so I think that this degree is really broad, and there are so many different ways that you can use it. So even now, I do work full-time in addition to writing. In my full-time job, I am in charge of hiring a large volume of employees for a tutoring company. And what I do most of the day is interview people. And definitely use a lot of the interview skills that I had from some of the 300 level courses. And I think the other thing that might be valuable is, especially at a big school and in, you know, it's a relatively big department, I think it's really important to like find your niche and like what you are really passionate about and to be really proactive about it. Because at such a big school, there's not necessarily someone like pushing on you to be like, why don't you go after that and start your own podcast or whatever. I think there has to be a lot of ambition that comes from within. And I think the program does a really awesome job of fostering that, and I would just encourage anyone to like take advantage of the resources that are here and to, you know, try out projects that they are passionate about.
Great. So tell me a little bit about that Guinness World Record that you set.
Oh.
How'd that come about?
So that was, I think it was 2011, actually. I saw a call for it online. Someone was putting together a group of natural redheads to break a Guinness World Record. We had to wear white t-shirts and bring a lot of sunscreen because it was, I believe it was in the summer. And there were nearly 1,000 of us, and we had to bring a photo of us as a baby and a recent photo to make sure that we were actually a natural redhead. And it was almost eerie being around so many. It's like moving through the world as a redhead, you sort of think you're a little unique. And I have some blonde in it now, so but it was a little eerie, and it was a cool experience. I think the record has since been broken, but it was a fun thing to be part of.
Absolutely. So in terms of the support of community, especially in Seattle, what do you think is the most important for an aspiring author to do in order to connect with an audience?
Yeah, so that's something I'm like just beginning to navigate now. I would say to find a critique group, whether that's in person or online. There are a lot of classes. I mean, the Hugo House is a really great resource. You know, in November, National Novel Writing Month is a great thing to get involved in. And then I'm also just beginning to connect with bookstores, and I know they have a lot of programs as well.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much for taking the time to be interviewed by us.